In old age, don't worry about anyone, not even your own family. Here's why. My dear friends, if you've lived long enough to see your hair turn white, your children grow up, and your dreams slowly become memories, then I want you to sit with me for a little while today. There is one lesson that took me more than 80 years to understand, and if someone had whispered it into my ear when I was younger, I might have slept better, smiled more, and carried far fewer invisible burdens. The lesson is simple, but it is one of the hardest truths for any loving person to accept. Don't spend your old age worrying about everyone else, not even your own family. I know those words may sound cold at first. Years ago, if someone had said them to me, I would have shaken my head and walked away. I believed that love meant worrying. I believed that being a good husband, a good father, and a good son meant carrying everyone else's troubles on my shoulders. I thought that if I stopped worrying, I would somehow stop loving. But life has a way of teaching lessons that pride refuses to learn. Looking back now, I realize something that still makes me smile with a little sadness. The people I loved were sleeping peacefully through the night while I lay awake worrying about problems that belonged to them, not to me. They rested. I exhausted myself. They continued living their lives. I slowly forgot how to live mine. So today I simply want to tell you what this old man finally discovered after making that mistake for most of his life. The first thing I learned is that the people who wear us out the most are rarely our enemies. They are usually the people we love the deepest. When I was young, I blamed hard work, money problems, difficult neighbors, unfair bosses, and all the struggles waiting outside my front door. I thought those things were draining my strength. But after many decades, I discovered something very different. My greatest exhaustion wasn't coming from the outside world. It came from inside my own heart. Every morning I woke up thinking about my children before I even thought about myself. If they didn't call, I worried. If they sounded tired, I worried. If they were too happy, I worried they might become careless. If they were too quiet, I imagined something terrible had happened. My mind became like a guard standing watch over lives that were never mine to control. At the time I called it responsibility. Today I call it attachment, disguised as love. There's an old saying that the deeper we love, the more we worry. That's true, but nobody tells you what happens when that worry never stops. It slowly wraps around both people like a rope. The person being watched begins to feel crowded, and the person doing the watching begins to lose their own peace. One evening I was sitting alone on my porch after everyone had gone to bed. The house was quiet, except for the sound of an old fan turning in the corner. I suddenly realized something that hit me harder than any disappointment I had ever faced. Everyone I loved was sleeping soundly, and the only person lying awake was me. That night I asked myself a question I should have asked years earlier. Why did I believe the whole family could only be safe if I never stopped worrying? I had no good answer. I only had a tired heart. The second thing I learned is that family can heal us, but it can also quietly consume us if we forget where healthy love ends and endless responsibility begins. Don't misunderstand me. I still believe family is one of life's greatest blessings. I would never trade the years I spent raising my children or caring for my wife. But somewhere along the road, I made a dangerous mistake. I started believing that every problem inside the family belonged to me. If there was disagreement, I had to fix it. If someone struggled financially, I had to rescue them. If someone made a poor decision, I had to prevent it. At first it made me feel useful. Then it made me feel important. Eventually, it made me completely exhausted. The strange part is that nobody asked me to carry all of that. I volunteered for the job without realizing the cost. Looking back now, I think many older people fall into the same trap. We enjoy feeling needed. We enjoy believing our experience gives us the right answers. We enjoy stepping in before someone else falls. But life doesn't work that way. A tree becomes strong because it stands against the wind. A child becomes wise because life teaches lessons no parent can fully explain. We want to spare our loved ones from every disappointment, Yet disappointment often becomes the greatest teacher they will ever meet. I once knew a father who spent decades making every decision for his son. He believed he was protecting him. As the years passed, his son stopped asking for advice altogether. The father couldn't understand why there was distance between them. The truth was painful. He hadn't loved too much. He had simply forgotten when to step back. Love should walk beside people, not walk in front of them forever. The third thing I learned may be the hardest truth of all. Most people don't actually need us to worry as much as we think they do. They need something entirely different. They need our trust. I remember one decision my own son made many years ago. I was convinced he was making a terrible mistake. I argued with him. I explained every possible consequence. I even became angry because I believed experience guaranteed I was right. But he chose his own path anyway. And yes, he failed exactly as I feared. I expected that failure to prove my wisdom. Instead, it taught me humility. After falling, he became stronger than before. He learned lessons that none of my speeches could ever have given him. Watching that changed something inside me forever. I realized people do not become mature because someone protects them from every hardship. They become mature because they survive hardship. Every person has a road that no one else can walk for them. Every soul has lessons that cannot be borrowed from another life. Since then, whenever I find myself worrying too much, I quietly ask one question. Am I trying to help this person? Or am I trying to control a future that doesn't belong to me? That question has saved me from many sleepless nights. The fourth thing I learned came much later, after my body had already begun slowing down. I used to believe old age was simply the result of passing years. I blamed wrinkles, aching knees, and slower mornings on the calendar. Then I met old friends my own age who looked remarkably alive. Their hair was just as gray as mine, but their eyes still carried a quiet light. They laughed easily. They slept well. They enjoyed ordinary afternoons in ways I had forgotten. I kept asking myself what made the difference. Eventually, I found the answer. We do not grow old first in the body. We grow old first in the mind. A restless mind steals strength long before age does. I spent years lying awake thinking about tomorrow, next month, next year, and problems that never even arrived. My body rested in bed while my thoughts wandered through disasters that existed only in imagination. Little by little, that habit drained something precious from me. It wasn't money. It wasn't health alone. It was the simple ability to enjoy being alive. I have met people who survived bankruptcy, buried loved ones, and endured terrible losses, yet they still carried peace because they knew when to stop carrying what was beyond their control. That lesson changed everything for me, and it prepared me for the next truth, perhaps the one that was hardest for this stubborn old man to accept. The fifth thing I learned was probably the most uncomfortable truth I ever had to face, because it forced me to stop blaming life and start looking honestly at myself. For many years I told myself that everything I did came from love. I worried because I loved. I gave advice because I loved. I stepped into other people's decisions because I loved. That explanation sounded noble, and for a long time I believed it without question. But one day I began asking myself something I had avoided for decades. Was it really love, or was it fear? The answer wasn't easy to accept. I remembered the day one of my children decided to leave a secure job and follow a dream that made no sense to me. I argued with all the confidence that old age and experience can give a man. I warned about failure. I reminded them how difficult life could be. I insisted I only wanted what was best. But deep inside, something else was happening. I was afraid. I was afraid they would make choices I could not predict. I was afraid life would hurt them in ways I couldn't prevent. Most of all, I was afraid of losing the illusion that I could still control what happened to the people I loved. That day, I discovered something painful. Sometimes what we call concern is simply the desire to control wearing the clothes of kindness. Those two things look almost identical from the outside. but they feel completely different inside the heart. Real love says, I believe in you. Control says, I trust my judgment more than your journey. Once I recognized that difference, I became quieter. I stopped trying to write other people's stories. I began respecting the fact that every human being has a life that belongs only to them. Some roads are smooth, some are rough, but every road teaches something. If I steal those lessons by trying to prevent every mistake, then I am not protecting someone. I am quietly delaying their growth. The sixth thing I learned is that truly wise people know when to step back. When I was younger, I believed strength meant always stepping forward. If there was a problem, I had to solve it. If someone was arguing, I had to settle it. If my family struggled, I had to carry the burden. People praised me for being dependable, and I won't pretend those compliments didn't make me feel good. But there came a day when I no longer wanted the phone to ring, not because I stopped loving my family, but because I had become emotionally exhausted. I remember asking myself a question that echoed through my heart for months. Am I still living my own life, or have I accidentally started living everyone else's? An older friend once told me something that sounded foolish back then. He said, the older you become, the more you must learn to step back. I thought he had given up on life. Years later, I realized he had simply become wiser than I was. Stepping back isn't quitting. It isn't becoming cold or uncaring. It is recognizing that people need room to become who they are meant to be. A child never learns balance if someone holds the bicycle forever. A tree never grows deep roots without facing the wind. A family becomes healthier when everyone is allowed to carry their own responsibilities. Since learning that lesson, I still show up when someone truly needs me. I still listen. I still care deeply. But I no longer rush to solve every problem before anyone has the chance to solve it themselves. Strange as it may sound, stepping back has actually brought me closer to the people I love. The seventh thing I learned softened my heart more than anything else. As I grew older, I realized every person I meet is carrying a burden I cannot see. When I was young, I was quick to give advice. If someone complained, I had an answer. If someone made a mistake, I had an opinion. I thought experience made me wise. Now I think experience has mostly made me humble. Over the years, I met successful people who secretly cried themselves to sleep. I met cheerful neighbors who were quietly battling loneliness. I met parents who smiled in public while worrying about illnesses they never spoke about. One afternoon, I sat with an old friend I had admired for years. From the outside, his life looked comfortable in every possible way. Then he looked at me and quietly said, I can't remember the last day my heart felt light. I never forgot those words. They reminded me that appearances are poor judges of reality. Even inside our own families, we often misunderstand each other. I once thought one of my children had become distant and ungrateful. Later, I discovered they had been carrying pressures they never wanted to place on my shoulders. I felt ashamed because I had spent so much time worrying about them that I forgot to truly listen to them. Since then, I have tried to replace judgment with curiosity and advice with compassion. We cannot rescue everyone, and we were never meant to. Sometimes the greatest kindness is simply allowing another person to feel seen without immediately trying to fix them. The eighth thing I learned is that people only change when they are ready, not when we are ready. That lesson cost me many years of frustration. I spent endless conversations trying to convince relatives, friends, and even strangers to make better decisions. I thought if I explained things clearly enough, they would change. Life proved otherwise. I watched one man ignore the advice of everyone who loved him until a painful experience finally taught him what no conversation ever could. It made me realize something that every older person should remember. Wisdom can be offered, but it cannot be forced. Experience can be shared, but it cannot be transferred. Every person has a door that only they can open. Once I accepted that, I stopped trying to reshape other people's lives. Instead, I started paying attention to my own. It is amazing how much peace enters your life when you stop trying to manage someone else's. The ninth thing I learned may be the most beautiful lesson of all. When the mind finally worries less, the world becomes visible again. For years, I lived almost entirely in tomorrow. While eating dinner, I was thinking about next week's problems. While walking with my family, I was thinking about work. While lying in bed, I was imagining disasters that never happened. My body was present, but my heart lived somewhere far away. Then one cool autumn morning, I carried a cup of tea onto my porch before sunrise. Nothing extraordinary happened. A few birds sang. The breeze moved through the trees. The sunlight slowly touched the grass. For the first time in years, I wasn't planning, fixing, fearing, or controlling. I was simply there. I cannot fully explain it, but I felt rich without gaining a single dollar. That morning taught me that happiness is often not about adding more to life. It is about removing what never belonged there in the first place. One less worry, one less unnecessary fear, one less attempt to control what cannot be controlled. That is sometimes enough to let joy return quietly through the front door. And finally, the 10th thing I learned is the one I hope stays with you after this video ends. Your family does not need a person who sacrifices themselves until nothing is left. They need someone whose presence brings peace. For most of my life, I believed my value came from carrying heavy burdens. I thought the more I worried, the more I loved. The more I suffered, the better husband, father, or grandfather I became. But I was wrong. Anxiety spreads through a home just as quickly as laughter does. If one person constantly lives in fear, everyone else begins breathing that fear without realizing it. Peace spreads the same way. I have visited homes that were simple and modest, yet they felt warm because the people inside were calm. I have also visited beautiful houses filled with expensive things where nobody truly felt at ease because everyone carried invisible tension. That's when I finally understood what my family had needed from me all along. They didn't need another sleepless night from me. They didn't need another lecture or another attempt to protect them from every storm. They needed someone whose steady heart reminded them that everything would be all right. That is the greatest gift an older person can leave behind. Not more possessions, not more worry, not even more advice, but a peaceful spirit that gives everyone else permission to breathe a little easier. So if you're listening to me today and your heart feels heavy because you've been carrying everyone else's future for years, I want to leave you with one simple thought. Love your family with all your heart, but don't lose yourself in the process. Stand beside them, but don't try to walk every mile for them. Offer wisdom, but don't demand obedience. Be available, but don't become responsible for everything. Life has its own rhythm, and every soul has its own journey. The older I become, the more I realize that our job is not to control the people we love. Our job is to love them well, while protecting the peace within our own hearts. When we do that, we don't love less. We love better. Thank you, my dear friends, for spending this time with me today. At my age, I know that time is one of the most precious gifts anyone can offer, and I never take that for granted. I sincerely hope that when you leave this conversation, your shoulders feel just a little lighter and your heart just a little calmer than before. Until we meet again, take good care of yourself, be kind to those around you, and don't forget to be just as kind to yourself. May your days be peaceful, your nights be restful, and may your home always be filled with quiet hearts instead of restless minds. Goodbye for now, my friends, and may God bless you wherever life leads you.